Just like my previous video, Monk continues to get nerfs, but is still strong and good. So if you're looking for options to hunt a level 200 plus Monk, this video is a compilation of all the spawns I think are worth hunting. But keep in mind, the character used has a skills of over 86 fist fighting base, which ends up at around 120 with all bonuses applied, magic level 37 with tier 3 imbuements, and all these hunts were recorded before the last nerf to the Virtue of Justice. I didn't go back to try all the spawns again, but instead tried the top 3 and I had pretty much the same experience. So although the overall numbers might be a bit lower, it's not by much. With that said, let me start off with the spawns that are viable starting at level 175. This level is necessary because monks get balanced Brawl, an AoE spell that turns ranged creatures into melee, so because of it, I went to spawns dense with ranged creatures, and these 3 spawns sit at a similar experience numbers, with the lowest one being the Lizard City. This is an old and forgotten spawn by now, it requires too much questing to get access, and is not good enough to hunt, be it on XP or profit is pretty bad. The only benefit is unlocking the other spawns and potentially doing bestiary here. At level 200 I was barely reaching 1.6kk raw and almost breaking even in supplies. Next up is a popular spawn, the Were Cave of Edron. This one is very good for all vocations, so I was curious on how it would be for monks, and it ended up being okay. Unfortunately, the creatures here summon too often, and their summons take up on chain bounces, so it feels a bit bad to hunt. Difficulty was easy, but I am also over level for the spawn, so keep that in mind. XP was sitting at over the 1.6kk with a profit of close to 150k an hour, making it definitely a viable choice. Next up is a personal suggestion, or a Moniz. This is still an underrated spawn that often gets ignored, and I keep on trying it with all vocations. Some monks were not an exception to this. The experience here got to over the 1.7kk raw, but is quite difficult and risky to hunt. Loot is enough to break even, and depending on the price of creature products, it's possible to profit, and with how many creatures there is, it's worth charming some of them. Next one is for all-timers, the Draken Walls. This one requires the same amount of questing as the Lizard City, which is too much for people to care about, and is not particularly great either. Here the experience was of around the 1.7kk, and profit is very dependent on item drops, so it can be all over the place. In this hunt, I was going for about 300k profit an hour, which is decent enough, and there is room for a bit higher XP for sure. Additionally, since they are taskable for the Killing in the Name of Quest, it's a good spot to farm some points. Next up is the Otherworld of Edron. This spawn is part of the Heart of Destruction questline, so it's not always available, and it only opens for about 30 minutes or 1 hour at a time. However, with only 2 creatures here, and with a balanced ratio, it's a pretty good spawn to hunt for bestiary, with decent experience of almost 1.9kk and enough loot to break even. A very underrated spawn for sure. Now back to a spawn to use Balance Brawl, the Lower Spike. This one got some love in the balancing project of 2024, and I believe it has potential, but with how big the spawn is, I haven't figured out what the best lap will be. Regardless, at level 200 the experience was of over the 1.9kk, but a difficult hunt for sure. It's a bit of waste as well, but it does have one of the most diverse amount of creatures, so when it comes to charming, it can be a top choice, and perhaps with some testing you can figure out a proper lap to hunt. Next up is the Medusa Tower, another spawn buffing the balancing project. This one is a great EK spawn and monks don't fall behind. Being able to hunt here just at 200 is quite impressive, especially because the hunt wasn't very dangerous. So it's not easy at this level, but it is doable, and the experience was around the 2kk raw, with a bit of profit. Keep in mind this is also dependent on item drops, so it's a bit random, but it should always be profit at the very least. Additionally, the main creatures are taskable, so it's pretty good to hunt for points. The other option will be Deeper Banuda, but because this one requires multiple quests, it's worse in that aspect. I tried out the easier floor, which is -3 of Deeper Banuda, and it was slightly better than Medusa Tower, while also being easier to hunt, with an XP of around the 2kk raw as well. However, the best floor is the last one, which is still somewhat contested in populated servers. On this one I got the experience to over the 2.2, with an estimate of over 250k profit the hour, and also easier to hunt than the Medusa Tower since you are able to kite. Keep in mind, if you hunt long enough to unlock Fatal Hole or Medusas, it can be better XP. Moving on to what I thought would be a profit hunt, Lower Russia. This spawn is accessed by taking a boat to Rashomon from this, and is no longer as popular as it once was. It was known as a profit spawn, but it ended up not being the case for this hunt, since it was hard to hunt and heavy potion consumption. I was barely breaking even on supplies. perhaps with some better drops, and in the case of new servers with silencer claws being expensive, then it could be good then. However, the XP was around the 2kk, so it was still competitive with the other spawns on the list so far. On number 5 is probably the most contested spawns nowadays for lower levels, the were hyenas. With a disclaimer to start off, even on my dead server it's still quite contested and I didn't bother waiting for the south area to be available. So what I tried out was the north spawn, but for the record, on previous hunts with other vocations the difference has been quite small. Yes, the south area is better and bigger, but this only matters once you're close to overkilling, and at least at level 200 I wasn't overkilling the north by much. So I could have made around 10% better on the south, but with more levels then it will become much better. Regardless, I was doing around the 2.1kk raw, with high profit of over 400k the hour. Keep in mind I was using a death protection imbuement on the armor, but overall it didn't feel dangerous to hunt. With that said, the next one is an underrated option, the Secret Serpents. This spawn also got some attention on the balancing project, with more density added and XP upgrades. And since then I've been curious on the potential of the spawn, and with the monk I had tried it the most, finding the best lab to be the southeast corner, which unfortunately is the last area to be unlocked on the questline. I will be making a quest guide for that soon, as well as dedicated videos showcasing the spawn, so consider subscribing. But anyways, the experience I was doing was of around the 2.3kk raw, 200k profit the hour before the last monk nerf. And as I was trying out the hunt again post-nerf, it ended up switching to the Renegade Quaras, which is a dynamic of the spawn itself. However, the experience was over the 2.2 at that point, and could have reached the 2.3kk again, making it the same post-changes. So if you want a spawn that is always available, this is great for that. Which also could be said of this next suggestion, the Drefia Grim Reapers. This one is an alternative spawn to hunt Grims if the Yalahar Cemetery is too contested, which is the case on my server at least, so I wanted to try this out because I'm holding a Grim Reaper prey. On this hunt, I kept a loot prey to avoid affecting the hunt as much, and I was able to do almost 2.4kk raw XP. This probably has room for upgrades on the lab. I feel like I had something going, but it might require more testing. Anyhow, it is still good XP, and if you hold preys on Grims, then might as well use them. Now on second place, the Asura Palace. This is once somewhat contested, but not as much anymore. I would say people sleep on the potential of Asura Palace since the introduction of the mirror area. Regardless, it is still pretty good, which is why it sits at number 2. I tried it out before the nerfs at level 219 and was doing over 2.5kk raw, and then I came back post-nerf at level 220 with a Merudri amulet and that made the hunt easier, but XP wise I did make less this time, to around the 2.4kk, so for once the nerf was noticeable. Also the profit is misleading, because I had my hotkeys set up wrong and was using Great Spirits when I wanted to use manas, and didn't notice until the end. But I do see most people seem to hunt with only Great Spirit potions or even ultimates, and it's worth pointing out that it is easier and safer to do so, but it is also expensive to maintain. So before you comment that nowhere of these spawns I have shared are profit, do pay attention to what your supply usage looks like. With that said, on first place, with no secret to anyone, is the Yalahar Cemetery. This is by far the best spawn for monks. You can start at level 150, although with a high difficulty, and it's still going to be very good. At level 200 pre-nerf, I was doing around the 3.5kk raw, which is crazy high for this level range, and after the nerf on level 220, I was doing around the 3.3kk. However, on this hunt I was doing the surface with nightmares, and that can lower your XP a bit if you're not overkilling. I will explain this more once it gets a dedicated video, but it's worth mentioning now, because I think I could have done the same XP as before the nerf or very close to it. Lastly, two spawns I didn't include this time because I didn't try them again is Barkless and Oramon West, both feature in the best spawns for level 150 monk, and back then I was doing an experience of over the 2kk on both, so it is still a very viable option to hunt post level 200. If you have any other suggestions, feel free to share them in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you on the next one.